What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars faces off against a talk show host who crosses every line imaginable? Tonight, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that left Jennifer Lopez storming off the Jimmy Kimmel live set, in what witnesses are calling the most dramatic walkout in late-night television history. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how a host's unprofessional behavior can completely destroy what should have been a routine promotional appearance. Before we get into the shocking details of what really went down behind those studio doors, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me what you think about celebrities standing up for themselves when hosts cross the line. The evening started like any other taping of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Jennifer Lopez arrived at the Hollywood studio looking absolutely stunning, in a form-fitting emerald green dress that complemented her radiant complexion perfectly. She had come to promote her latest project, a passion venture that she had been working on for over 3 years. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Phones were recording every moment they could capture, and the atmosphere seemed electric with anticipation. What nobody in that studio could have predicted was that they were about to witness one of the most uncomfortable and unprofessional interviews in television history. As Jennifer settled into the guest chair, adjusting her dress and flashing that million-dollar smile that has captivated audiences for decades, Jimmy Kimmel walked out with his usual swagger. But something was different about his demeanor tonight. There was an edge to his step, a smirk that seemed more malicious than playful. The audience erupted in their usual applause, but those paying close attention could see that Jimmy's eyes held a glint that suggested he had something planned, something that would make this interview anything but standard promotional fare. Thus, show's producers had briefed both parties beforehand about the topics that would be covered during the segment. Jennifer's team had specifically outlined certain subjects that were off-limits, personal matters that she preferred to keep private, and professional boundaries that should be respected. These weren't unreasonable requests, they were standard protocols that every professional talk show follows when dealing with A-list celebrities. Every host worth their salt understands that there are lines you simply don't cross, especially when someone is graciously giving you their time to help promote their work. But as the cameras began rolling and the interview officially started, it became crystal clear that Jimmy Kimmel had his own agenda for the evening. His opening remarks seemed innocent enough, the usual banter about her latest projects and upcoming ventures. Jennifer responded with her characteristic charm and professionalism, discussing her work with genuine enthusiasm and giving the audience exactly what they had come to see. She talked about the challenges of bringing her latest project to life, the incredible team she had worked with, and her excitement about sharing this new chapter of her career with her fans around the world. However, as the interview progressed, Jimmy's questions began taking a decidedly different turn. What started as professional inquiries about her career slowly morphed into something far more personal and invasive. He began probing into areas that had been explicitly marked as off-limits during the pre-interview discussions. His tone shifted from conversational to confrontational, and his questions became increasingly inappropriate and boundary-crossing. The audience, initially engaged and entertained, began to sense the uncomfortable shift in energy that was building between the host and his guest. Jennifer, being the seasoned professional that she is, initially tried to deflect these inappropriate questions with grace and humor. She attempted to steer the conversation back to her work, back to the reasons she had agreed to appear on the show in the first place. Her responses remained polite but firm, clearly indicating that she was not comfortable with the direction the interview was taking. Any reasonable host would have picked up on these social cues and respected their guests' boundaries, but Jimmy Kimmel seemed determined to push forward with his inappropriate line of questioning. The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Audience members who had come expecting a fun, light-hearted interview were instead witnessing something that felt more like an interrogation. Jennifer's body language began to change as she realized that this wasn't going to be the professional appearance she had signed up for. Her smile became more forced, her posture more defensive, and her responses shorter and more clipped. She was clearly trying to maintain her composure while sending every possible signal that the current direction of the interview was unacceptable. But Jimmy Kimmel, rather than reading the room and adjusting his approach, seemed to interpret her discomfort as an opportunity to push even harder. His questions became more invasive, more personal, and more disrespectful with each passing minute. What should have been a celebration of her work was turning into a public ambush, and everyone in that studio could feel the atmosphere growing more toxic by the second. The professional courtesy that should exist between host and guest was being systematically dismantled by a man who seemed more interested in creating controversy than conducting a respectful interview. The breaking point came when Jimmy decided to bring up a topic that Jennifer's team had explicitly, unequivocally stated was completely off-limits. With cameras rolling and a live studio audience watching, he launched into a line of questioning about her personal relationships, specifically targeting her past romantic involvements in a way that was both invasive and completely inappropriate for a promotional interview. His approach wasn't subtle or tactful. It was a direct assault on her privacy disguised as entertainment for his audience. Jennifer's face immediately changed. The polite smile that she had been maintaining throughout the increasingly uncomfortable interview vanished entirely, replaced by a look of shock and genuine anger. Her voice, which had remained steady and professional despite the mounting tension, took on a sharp edge as she responded. "Excuse me, but that topic was specifically discussed as being off-limits before we started this interview. I came here to talk about my work, not to have my personal life dissected for your entertainment." But Jimmy, rather than backing down or offering an apology for his obvious breach of professional protocol, doubled down on his inappropriate behavior. He laughed dismissively, as if her legitimate concerns were nothing more than a joke for his amusement. "Oh, come on, Jennifer. You're a public figure. People want to know about these things. It's all part of being in the spotlight, isn't it?" His tone was condescending and dismissive, treating her reasonable boundaries as if they were unreasonable demands from a diva, rather than basic professional courtesy. The audience was no longer laughing. The uncomfortable silence that filled the studio was deafening. Even the most casual observers could see that something had gone terribly wrong with this interview. This wasn't playful banter or harmless celebrity gossip. This was a clear violation of agreed-upon boundaries by a host who seemed to have no respect for his guests' privacy or dignity. Jennifer sat up straighter in her chair, her entire demeanor shifting from accommodating guest to someone who was not going to tolerate this level of disrespect. "Jimmy, I specifically told your producers that certain topics were off-limits. This was agreed upon before I walked onto this stage. The fact that you're choosing to ignore those boundaries and ambush me on live television says everything about your character and nothing about mine." Rather than showing any remorse or professional courtesy, Jimmy's response was to become even more aggressive and inappropriate. He began making snide comments about celebrities who can't handle real questions, and suggested that Jennifer was being overly sensitive about perfectly normal inquiries. His behavior was becoming increasingly hostile, and it was clear that he had no intention of respecting her boundaries or conducting the interview in a professional manner. The situation escalated further when Jimmy made a comment that crossed not just professional lines, but basic human decency. He made a crude remark about her personal life that was so inappropriate and offensive that several audience members audibly gasped. The comment was not only invasive, but also bordered on harassment, delivered with a smirk that showed he knew exactly how out of line he was being. Jennifer's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She stood up from her chair, her face flushed with anger and disbelief. "That is completely unacceptable. I will not sit here and allow you to disrespect me like this on national television. This interview is over." Her voice was strong and clear, cutting through the uncomfortable silence that had fallen over the studio. But Jimmy, incredibly, continued his inappropriate behavior even as his guest was clearly preparing to leave. Instead of apologizing or attempting to salvage the situation, he made another snide comment about how she couldn't handle the heat and suggested that walking out would make her look unprofessional. His complete lack of self-awareness was stunning to witness. Jennifer turned to face him directly, her anger now fully visible. Unprofessional? You want to talk about unprofessional behavior? You've spent the last 20 minutes violating every agreement we made before this interview started. You've crossed every boundary, ignored every request for basic respect, and now you have the audacity to call me unprofessional for refusing to tolerate your harassment. The studio had fallen completely silent except for the sound of Jennifer's heels clicking against the floor as she moved away from the interview area. Her team, who had been watching from the wings, immediately moved to support her decision to leave. They had witnessed the entire debacle and knew that Jimmy's behavior had been completely out of line from the moment he started ignoring the pre-agreed boundaries. Jimmy, still seeming to believe that he was somehow in the right, called out after her, "Jennifer, come on, don't be like this. We're just having a conversation here." But his words fell on deaf ears. Jennifer had reached her limit with his unprofessional conduct, and nothing he could say at that point would repair the damage he had caused through his complete disregard for basic courtesy and respect. As Jennifer continued moving toward the exit, her team quickly flanked her, creating a protective barrier between her and the cameras that were still rolling. The audience sat in stunned silence, many of them clearly uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. This wasn't the entertaining celebrity interview they had expected. It was a masterclass in how not to treat a guest who had graciously agreed to appear on your show. Jimmy, perhaps finally realizing that his behavior had consequences, made one last desperate attempt to convince Jennifer to return to her seat. "Jennifer, wait, let's just finish the interview. I promise we can talk about whatever you want." But his words rang hollow after 20 minutes of systematically ignoring her clearly stated boundaries and treating her with blatant disrespect. Jennifer paused near the exit and turned back one final time. Her voice, when she spoke, was controlled, but filled with justified anger. "Jimmy, you had multiple opportunities to conduct this interview professionally. Your producers briefed you on the topics that were appropriate to discuss. I came here in good faith to promote my work and to give your audience a good show. Instead, you chose to turn this into some kind of ambush interview designed to humiliate me for your entertainment." She gestured toward the audience, many of whom were nodding in agreement with her assessment of the situation. "These people came here to be entertained, not to watch you harass your guests. You've not only disrespected me, you've disrespected them, and you've disrespected your own show. This is exactly the kind of behavior that gives talk show hosts a bad reputation." Jimmy's face had gone red. Whether from embarrassment or anger was impossible to tell. His usual quick wit seemed to have completely abandoned him in the face of Jennifer's articulate and justified criticism of his conduct. He stammered something about it being just entertainment and tried to suggest that she was overreacting to what he called normal interview questions, but Jennifer was having none of it. "Normal interview questions? Jimmy, you crossed every line that was drawn for you before this interview started. You made personal attacks, you violated agreed-upon boundaries, and you treated me like some kind of target for your amusement, rather than a guest who deserves basic respect. There is nothing normal about the way you've conducted yourself tonight." The studio crew, who had witnessed countless interviews over the years, seemed equally shocked by what they had observed. Many of them had worked with Jennifer before, and knew her to be one of the most professional and gracious guests in the industry. The fact that she had been pushed to the point of walking out spoke volumes about how inappropriate Jimmy's behavior had been throughout the entire interview. Jennifer reached the exit. She delivered one final statement that would become the defining moment of the entire debacle. "I've been in this industry for decades, and I've never experienced such unprofessional behavior from a talk show host. You've shown tonight that you have no respect for your guests, no respect for professional boundaries, and no respect for Basic human decency. I came here to promote my work and to connect with fans, but instead I've been subjected to harassment disguised as entertainment. She looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience both in the studio and at home. To everyone watching, you deserve better entertainment than watching someone get ambushed and harassed on national television. There are plenty of hosts out there who know how to conduct themselves professionally and treat their guests with respect. I suggest you find them. With that, Jennifer Lopez walked out of the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, leaving behind a host who had completely destroyed what should have been a routine promotional interview through his unprofessional and disrespectful behavior. The audience sat in uncomfortable silence, many of them clearly sympathetic to Jennifer's position and disgusted by what they had witnessed. The cameras continued rolling as Jimmy tried to salvage something from the wreckage of his own making, but the damage was done. He had violated every rule of professional hosting, ignored every boundary that had been established, and treated one of the industry's most respected performers with shocking disrespect. The interview that was supposed to promote Jennifer's latest project instead became a showcase of everything wrong with certain corners of late-night television. The incident would go down as one of the most dramatic walkouts in talk show history, but more importantly, it served as a powerful reminder that even the biggest stars in the world shouldn't have to tolerate harassment and disrespect just because they're in the public eye. Jennifer Lopez had shown that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is refuse to participate in unprofessional behavior, even when the cameras are rolling and the whole world is watching. So what do you think about celebrities who stand up for themselves when hosts cross the line? Should guests be expected to tolerate inappropriate questions just because they're promoting something, or do they have the right to walk away when boundaries are violated? Drop your thoughts in the Q&A comments below and make sure to subscribe for more stories about the real drama happening behind the scenes in Hollywood.